welcome back to the Pauper metagame, where we're going to break down another deck type. So let's see what we're going to hit today. Let's see here, is it Delver? No, we already did that one. Mono Blue Delver. God, that's number 2 now? Is it Delver? Alright, well, we'll talk about that later. We already did these. Boros, we already did that. Tron, yeah. Let's see if we got anything that's actually interesting floating around here. Hey, look at this. Stompy. Wow, Stompy's moved up to number 5? Alright, let's check this out. Alright guys, here we are, back on the Pauper metagame, and today we're going to break down Stompy. Smashing faces and probably beating up on some Delver decks. Anyway, let's jump right in. Let's go ahead and break down some of the cards. We've got Nettle Sentinel, everybody's favorite little 2/2 green beater for 1 mana. Quirion Ranger, secretly the most powerful card in the deck. Skargan Pit Skulk, who's pretty sweet. It's 1 for a 1/1 with Bloodthirst 1, and also it says creatures with power less than Skargan Pit Skulk's power can't block it. So let's talk about this just briefly. One of the nice things about this deck is that you're able to really make your creatures pretty beefy pretty quickly. So let's say that you drop something like a Nettle Sentinel on turn 1, you attack in for 2, you do a little damage. Now you're able to drop your Skarg on the battlefield as a 2/2. Then you throw a Rancor on it, and after that the Skarg can't be blocked by anything with less than 4 power. Also, a little bit later on turn 3, if you want, you could also throw an Elephant Guide on the Skarg and perhaps make it a 5/5, which is pretty tough for most things to block. Also, if you just need an unblockable for a single turn to smash in for lethal, you can always go with a Vines of Vastwood. In addition, you could always throw a Hunger of the Howpack on your Skarg and make it beefy that way. But why would you want to waste all this sweet beefy action on a Skarg when instead you could throw it on a Vault Skurg? One of the nice things about the Stompy deck is that you've got access to lifelink on the Skurg, Vault Skurg. So not only do you have lifelink, but you get it on a flying body. So basically, any chance you get to throw Elephant Guide, Rancor, or a powered up Hunger of the Howpack on the Vault Skurg is going to be good times. One of the things you have to keep in mind, especially with all of the Screds and all of the random 3 and 4 damage things that are floating around out there, is first of all with the Vault Skurg, you want to try to weigh out if you're going to be able to get out of the range of some burn spell being able to take you down, or at a minimum you want to be careful not to get 2 for 1. This is especially important when you're going to stick your Elephant Guide. This is a 3 mana enchantment that gives enchant creature +3/+3 permanently, and when that creature dies you get a 3/3 green elephant creature token as a replacement. So if you stick your Elephant Guide on the Vault Skurg, you get 4/4, you're beaten in. If the Vault Skurg dies, it's a little bit of a downer, but it's not that bad. Whereas if you play your Elephant Guide on your Vault Skurg and they bolt it in response, it's kind of a blowout. You get 2 for 1, but it's really worse than 2 for 1. It's more like getting 3 for 1, because now not only do you lose your Vault Skurg, not only do you lose your Elephant Guide, but you also miss out on getting a 3/3 green elephant token. And I mean, come on, that's a real downer. So it's imperative that we stick the Elephant Guide. Also, Rancor is extremely powerful. It's probably one of the most important cards in the deck. If you are able to stick a Rancor on turn 2, your win percentage is going to go up by, I don't know, some obscene percentage. So making sure that you're jamming your Rancor in situations where you can't get 2 for 1 is also extremely important. So you want to stick it as fast as you can to get ahead of removal. You want to pressure in with a lot of damage, and then you only want to recast your Rancor when you're pretty sure you can do it safely, or you basically have to because of tempo or other considerations. At any rate, besides Vault Skurg, maybe you don't really care about gaining life and beating down in the air. Maybe what you really want to do is beat face with your Silhana Ledgewalker. So this guy has Shroud and can only be blocked by flyers. So, I'm sorry, I said Shroud. I meant Hexproof. Apologize. So Shroud means can't be targeted at all. Hexproof means just can't be targeted by your opponent's spells. So basically, play a Silhana Ledgewalker, throw an Elephant Guide on your Ledgewalker, beat for 4 every turn, and call yourself a genius. It's always a sweet play. Now, one of my favorite cards in the deck is the River Boa. You will see some lists out there that drop the River Boa, and that there's some of these lists will run 4 Quirion Rangers and 4 Vault Skurgs and no River Boas. I've seen some lists that run 4 Quirion Rangers, 4 Vault Skurgs, 18 lands and no Solana Ledgewalkers. You'll see some mixture of these cards in most of the lists. I like the list that's up there right now, this 6-0 Pauper Challenge list, because it shows off a nice mixture of all the cards. But anyway, really the River Boa and the Solana Ledgewalker, I feel like this 2-mana slot here, these cards are kind of competing with each other. The Solana Ledgewalker really shines against control decks that don't have a lot of edict effects because it can't be targeted, so it's going to help you get there. The River Boa really shines against other creature decks, like if you're going up against a red aggressive deck, then the River Boa is going to be really nice because it's a real beating against other decks that are trying to attack in. Also, you can do other shenanigans like throw an Elephant Guide on the River Boa, make it a 5/4 that regenerates, attack with it, and then untap it every turn with your Quirion Ranger. So basically you can give your River Boa vigilance, regeneration, and heaven forbid if they actually have islands, it's also unblockable. So River Boa can do some pretty nasty things itself. One of the sweetest enablers in the deck is the Nest Invader. The Nest Invader is a 2-mana 2/2. When it comes into play, you create a 0/1 colorless token that you can sacrifice to add a colorless mana to your mana pool. So the Nest Invader enables all kinds of shenanigans. You can actually use the colorless token to cast your Vault Skurg, so there's some nice mana efficiency synergies there. Also, you can frequently you'll see people sacrificing their Eldrazi spawn token to enable Hunger of the Howlpack. Hunger of the Howlpack is a 1-mana instant that says put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, or put 3 +1/+1 counters on target creature instead if a creature died this turn. So a lot of times you'll play Hunger of the Howlpack on a different creature when your opponent kills something, but it's important and worth noting that the Stompy deck doesn't have to wait for your opponent to kill one of your creatures. You can proactively trigger your Morbid all by yourself thanks to Nest Invader. And being able to get a Hunger of the Howlpack online quickly, much like Rancor, is something that's going to increase your odds of winning by a rather large percentage. Also, it's worth noting if you're going up against a control deck that has destroy effects like Doomblade and that kind of thing, Hunger of the Howlpack is a little sketchier because you could be in a situation where you're going to get 2 for 1, so you have to be very selective and careful on how you use that. However, if you're going up against a deck that's relying on primarily burn for removal, then you can go all in pumping up one creature quite a bit and get out of the range of burn. As always, watch out for Double Bolt. Just because you get to 4 toughness doesn't mean you're out of the woods yet. Anyway, next up we have Burning Tree Emissary, a card that leads to one of the most broken openings you can ever have. If on turn 2 you're spamming Burning Tree Emissary into Burning Tree Emissary, into Nest Invader, into Vault Skurg, yeah, you're probably winning that game. So as you can see, the creature package has a lot of power. Each of these cards is just doing work. The Nettle Sentinel is an opening 2-mana 2/2 that can beat in every turn. One of the things to keep in mind, this is just good old-fashioned basic 101 kind of stuff. You want to attack before you play your creatures. A lot of the time there's going to be some tactical situations where that's going to change, but this is doubly so when you're playing with Nettle Sentinel. Nettle Sentinel only untaps each turn if you've cast a green spell. So take your time when you're playing Stompy. This is one of those decks where it's really important to execute doing just simple but fundamental things that are going to increase your win percentage, like attacking first every time. Well, not every time. Again, you got to evaluate your tactical situations. But because you're playing an aggro deck, don't worry about your clock. You should have plenty of time most of the time to be able to think about your plays. And if you're going to time with this deck, it's gone wrong anyway. So anyway, Nettle Sentinel, because it untaps when you've played a green spell, you want to attack. play your green spell, have it untap. Also, even in a scenario where you don't really have to worry about doing anything fancy, say you know you're going to play your Vines of Vastwood, you're going to +4/+4 a creature, you don't really need to do it during combat because you don't have to worry about being tricksy because you know your opponent's tapped out and they can't block anyway. Or let's point to a little bit of an odder scenario. Let's say your opponent has a 3/3 creature out and you've got your Skargan Pit Skulk with Bloodthirst, so it's a 2/2. And you've also got your Nettle Sentinel and never mind. The point is simply I was gonna say like maybe there's some weird scenario where you want to make sure they can't block your Pit Skargan, so you know, attack with your creatures and then play the Vines of Vastwood on your Skargan, so you make it like a 6/6 and they can't block with their 3/3. Even if you know you need to do this before blockers are declared, go ahead and declare attackers first, so it'll untap your Nettle Sentinel. But I think coming up with this whole scenario is just going to get way too convoluted. So the simple point is just make sure and attack first before you do stuff with your Nettle Sentinel. Quarian Ranger allows you to do all kinds of weird, crazy, degenerate, busted stuff. It allows you to play hands you otherwise couldn't. Let's say you have a 1-land hand. You play a forest, you drop a Quarian Ranger, you can then tap your forest, bounce your forest, replay your forest, and now you have access to 2 mana. So on a 1-land hand, you're still going to be able to play your Burning Tree Emissary, and that's pretty cool. So Quarian Ranger adds a level of stability to this deck by being able to be on 2 mana even with a 1-land hand and a Quarian Ranger that a lot of decks are not able to do. For this reason, I like playing 4 Quarian Rangers even though it's not a very powerful attacker. Honestly, I like this list, but I'd rather run 4 Quarian Rangers and 2 Solana Ledgewalkers. And I don't know, I really like Vault Scourge too, so I might want to have 4 copies of that. But running 3 Vault Scourges is okay. I feel like Quarian Ranger performs the same kind of function in a different way that you see Preordained do in the blue decks. It adds a level of consistency to your hands and allows you to keep things. Now, having said all that, if you keep a 1-land hand with a Quarian Ranger, you drop your Quarian Ranger and you're really leaning on Quarian Ranger for your second turn and they bolt your Quarian Ranger, well, you could be in trouble. So keep that in mind. But anyway, beyond being able to add a level of consistency to what you can do by being able to squeeze out extra mana by bouncing your forests and replaying them, also it can give your creatures a sort of vigilance effect, which is quite powerful. You can attack with creatures, untap, and block with them as well. Also, there's occasionally, I don't know, weird outside scenarios. Don't forget you can actually untap your opponent's creatures. Again, coming up with, you know, a good scenario for where that functionally matters. I can't think of the oddball scenario off the top of my head, but there are weird scenarios where it can actually matter. So remember, you can actually untap your opponent's creatures. It's any creature. Also, with the Burning Tree Emissary, since you create a green and a red mana, you want to be sure that if you're going to play your Vault Scourge out, that you burn the red mana for the Vault Scourge and preserve your green mana for one of the other things that are available. That's if you happen to be casting a Vault Scourge. Just kind of covering some weird outside edge case stuff. So the Nest Invader 0/1 colorless Eldrazi token you get, in addition to being able to sack it to ramp, and in addition to being able to use this as a Hunger of the Howlpack enabler, the 0/1 token performs a couple of other functions. The 0/1 token is available just as a straight up chump blocker if you're going in against another deck where you're trading beats on the ground. Then having access to another chump blocker is not irrelevant. And also against a lot of these blue-black control decks that have a lot of edict effects, having access to a 0/1 that's a free throwaway to an edict effect is really good. So pay close attention to what kind of deck you're going up against. If you're going up against a blue-black deck that has edict effects, I wouldn't sacrifice your token just to enable a Hunger of the Howlpack unless you you have a window of opportunity that's going to lead to winning the game very quickly, because odds are your opponent's going to kill something anyway to enable your Hunger of the Howpack, and that 0/1 token is going to be an important insurance against an edict effect. So keep that in mind as well. So basically that 0/1 token is doing a lot of work. It's protecting against edict effects, it's chump blocking, it's enabling Hunger of the Howpack, it's turboing out other creatures by using its sacrifice to add mana ability. So that 0/1 token is doing work. Riverboa, I've already talked about different shenanigans with the regeneration. Don't forget it has Island Walk, so it's completely unblockable against a lot of these Delver decks. So there have been times where Riverboa has been completely dropped out in favor of Solana Ledgewalker, but I think right now with a couple of Delver decks at the top of the metagame, I'd say that Island Walk is even better than can only be blocked by flyers, because Riverboa just can't be blocked by Delver decks. By the way, you probably all know this, but Island Walk also works on snow-covered Island Walk. Snow-covered islands are not super secret tech to defeat Island Walk. Most of you already knew that, but whatever. Solana Ledgewalker, there's not a lot else to talk about with this dude. And the Vault Skirg, let me talk about something that's a little weird and counterintuitive with this guy. So, you got the Vault Skirg, and you got this catch-22 when you go up against burn decks specifically. So, you run into a burn deck, and you've got a Vault Skirg in your opening hand, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna win. So you jam your Vault Skirg, and they burn it off the board. You're like, well that didn't go well. They killed my creature, and I had to pay 2 life for the Phyrexian mana, and now I don't have a lifelink creature out anymore. Alright, so game 2, we learned we're not just going to jam our Vault Skirg, so instead we wait until turn 2. So we lose a little bit of tempo, so now on turn 2 we play our Vault Skirg, and we do it with Vines of Vastwood backup. So here's another card we haven't talked about a whole lot yet. It's a 1 mana green instant spell with kicker. And it says, target creature can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control this turn. If Vines of Vastwood was kicked, that creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. So basically, for 1 mana, you can give one of your creatures hexproof, and for 2 mana, you can give it hexproof and +4/+4. So, you wait till you have 2 mana, you jam your Vault Skirg, you leave 1 mana up, they try to bolt off your Vault Skirg, and you protect it with Vines of Vastwood. Only your opponent jams a second burn spell that they were holding, and they kill your Vault Skirg anyway. So these are all kind of downer type scenarios. In a perfect world, you're jamming a few other creatures that are creating pressure. You're holding off on playing your Vault Skirg. You finally play your Vault Skirg when you can back it up, and hopefully they don't have too much removal left. They're holding more burn cards that can just go to the face. Then you're able to stick an Elephant Guide or a Rancor on your Vault Skirg, ride it to victory with Vines of Vastwood backup, and win the game. The problem you run into when you're going up against burn decks, though, is you play the Vault Skirg too quickly and they just burn it off the board. You hold it too long, and by the time you play it, it doesn't have haste. So even when you play the Vault Skirg, you have to live through your opponent's entire next turn, and if you're waiting till turn 3 or 4, you may just, already be dead. Especially if you're waiting till like turn 5 against a burn deck, there's a pretty good chance that's just game over unless they're really flooding out. So the other thing is, if you don't have the Vines of Vastwood backup, it's also kind of a downer to play out the Vault Skirg and just have it get burned off, because then you take 2 damage. So not only did you not gain any life, but you dealt damage to yourself. The only thing I can say is if they're pointing burn spells at your creatures, that's better than if they're pointing burn spells at your face. So keep that in mind as well. All I'm trying to point out here is Vault Skirg may seem like an auto win against burn. It's not. It's very situational. You really have to feel out the situation. You got to play it just right, and even then it might not work out. Alright, Rancor, it's amazing. It's a 1 green mana enchantment that gives a creature +2/+0 and trample, and when Rancor's put into the graveyard, comes back to your hand. Card's amazing. Elephant Guide, also already talked about that. This list is running 17 land. I would say 16, 17 land. Yeah, I don't really like running 18. I think 17 is where you want to be with this. Feels about right. So for the sideboard, this is a pretty tight sideboard list. And maybe we'll try to look at a few other lists just to talk about different sideboard cards. So here we have Gleeful Sabotage. as a 4 of, I do like this. It's a 2-mana sorcery, destroy target artifact or enchantment, has Conspire. So Conspire, you just tap 2 of your creatures. They have to share a color, but you don't have to really worry about that because all your creatures share a color except for Vaultskirk. Well, and then I mean if you want to get technical, we've got a colorless Eldrazi token too, but whatever. Anyway, and when you tap your 2 green creatures, you're able to basically create another copy of Gleeful Sabotage. So as long as you got a couple of untapped green creatures, you play your Gleeful Sabotage, you get to blow up an artifact and an enchantment, or 2 artifacts, or 2 enchantments. Pretty sweet. This is particularly good against Boggles and Affinity. Gleeful Sabotage is awesome because it allows you to plug in one piece of sideboard tech that's both good against artifact decks and enchantment decks. Also, don't forget, this is something you can use to take out Circle of Protection green, which is something you'll see Boros Monarch decks running from time to time, as well as some Tron lists from time to time. When Stompy gets really, really popular, you'll start seeing Circle of Protection green crop up. So even if you're not going up against some nasty, super aggressive, Affinity, Boggles, maybe even Heroic kind of shenanigans, occasionally you might still need to bring in Gleeful Sabotage against control decks to blow up Circles of Protection. Also, Journey to Nowhere, Pestilence, these are various options. Just keep in mind Gleeful Sabotage is something, not saying you should, but don't think that Gleeful Sabotage is just here to bring in against other aggressive decks. It's also something you can occasionally pull in against controlling style decks as well. Epic Confrontation is our go-to removal. It's a 2-mana sorcery. Target creature gets +1/+2, and it fights another target creature you don't control. So the nice thing about the Epic Confrontation is you can use it to kill an opponent's creature and take advantage of the +1/+2 to deal an extra point of damage when you attack. So you want to battle first, ideally clear off your opponent's only blocker, and then beat your opponent down with a little extra point of damage. So some lists actually run some of these in the main deck. Again, this could be something where you have 2 of these in the sideboard, 2 of these in the main deck, and like for example, there's lists out there that don't run any River Boas, which right now with where the meta is at, with theoretically a lot of blue decks out there, I would definitely want to run some River Boas in the main deck. But Epic Confrontation is a cool card. I don't know about 4 of these in the sideboard. Might be nice to squeeze in 1 in the main deck somewhere, but it's not really necessary. So I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 copies in the sideboard is what I would say. Scattershot Archer is, as a 4 of, is not a terrible idea right now, again, with a lot of these Delver decks out there. It's a 1-mana 1/2 that says tap, Scattershot Archer deals 1 damage to each creature with flying. And don't forget, you can combine this with Quirion Ranger to tap your Scattershot Archer, untap your Scattershot Archer, and then tap it again to deal basically 2 damage to all creatures with flying. So this means you can use a Scattershot Archer and a Quirion Ranger to take out an already transformed Delver, which is kind of cool. Gutshot, this deals with all little flying 1/1 fairies and such. Also, Gutshot is probably in here as a nod to Tireless Tribe as well. This is a nice silver bullet a lot of the time against Tribe, though not always. So some of the other things we need to talk about, there's also the Scattershot Archer kind of ends up filling in the same place as the I'm trying to remember the name of it. There's a artifact, it's a 1-mana artifact that costs 3 to equip and gives your creature tap, deal 1 damage to target creature or target player. So I'm trying to remember what the name of that thing is. It'll probably come to me later. Or hey, you know what? We can pull up some other Stompy lists and go find it. I'm sure it's in the sideboard on one of these somewhere. Wow, there's a lot of these lists that are just running the exact same stuff. Wow, look at that. Not a lot of creativity going on with these. Oh, look at this. Spore Frog in the sideboard. Gets them every time. Oh, Natural State. If you really, this makes no sense to me in terms of I would not run 2 Natural State and 1 Gleeful Sabotage. I don't know, maybe this was like a budget consideration since Natural State is like 4 cents and Gleeful Sabotage is $1. If you got to make budget, you know, alterations to your sideboard, then natural state I guess you can go with as a budget alternative, but I would definitely go with 4 Gleeful Sabotage before I would be bringing any natural states. If there's a situation where both Affinity and Boggles are both huge, then I'm not entirely opposed to running like 4 Gleeful Sabotages and 2 natural state, because you're playing an all-in aggro deck. You don't really have any card draw, so even though you might think 4 copies is a lot, I mean, having 6 copies is going to be a lot more reliable if you know you really need some artifact and enchantment hate coming out of the sideboard to help you out. Anyway, let's look at some more of these lists. I am kind of disappointed with the lack of diversity we're seeing out of these sideboards. Let's see what else we can find. Also, occasionally you'll see Relic of Progenitus, maybe as a 1 or a 2 of in these sideboards. Moment's Peace, I think if you want to have a fog effect, this is probably better than the Fog Frog. So yeah. Ranger's Guile, having an extra hexproof option out of the sideboard, not so sure about that. Hornet Sting to me seems strictly worse than Gut Shot, so there's that. And man, I can't believe there's none of the artifact I was talking about. So okay, here we go. Viridian Longbow, that's the thing I was thinking of. So I already broke down the card for you. 1 mana, equips for 3, gives a creature a tap, 1 damage to target creature or player. So let's talk about the trade-offs between Scattershot Archer and Viridian Longbow. So if you jam a Scattershot Archer against Red-Blue Delver, they can use removal to kill your Scattershot Archer, and then it's just gone. You could jam Viridian Longbow against Blue-Red Delver and equip a creature. They kill the creature, but you've still got your Longbow, so you can just keep re-equipping it, and eventually they're not going to be able to stop that because they don't have any artifact kill on the main. The problem is, because you're going to be re-equipping, and if they kill one of your creatures and you're re-equipping again, and then they kill another creature and you're re-equipping again, and they're a tempo deck. So if they're able to stall you getting this Viridian Longbow online, then the game may already be over before you can start doing damage. So that's the thing, because you're looking at 4 mana before Viridian Longbow comes online. 1 mana to cast, 3 mana to equip. So 4 mana to get this thing going. Also, you need 3 mana before you can get this on. You're not going to be able to get that done before turn 3. I mean, you can play it turn 1, but you can't bring it online until turn 3. However, it's more resilient. It's harder. Mono Blue Delver, its bounce spells pretty much all target creatures, and Blue-Red Delver has burn spells that target creatures. Neither deck has a viable way to deal with an artifact. So the Viridian Longbow has a lot more resilience, but it's a lot slower. So that's kind of the difficult call. The Scattershot Archer, the Red-Blue Delver deck can just burn this thing off. Alternatively, the Mono Blue Delver deck can just bounce it, and then when you go to replay it, they counterspell it. So the Scattershot Archer is fast. You can jam it on turn 1. If your Delver opponent doesn't have some way to deal with it, you're basically going to be in a pretty strong position. However, the Scattershot Archer is subject to being a lot easier to deal with than the Viridian Longbow. Also, the Blue Delver deck, if they attack you a few times, you play it, they bounce it, you replay it, it's going to come down, it's going to have Summoning Sickness. So if you actually can survive until the mid game and you've actually got 4 mana available, Scattershot Archer is going to come down with Summoning Sickness. Viridian Longbow can come down and get attached to a creature that is already past Summoning Sickness, so you can activate Viridian Longbow the turn it comes down. So Viridian Longbow, better in the middle game, slower, more resilient to hate, but you know, it's not uncommon for you to be playing this aggro green deck and the game's over before you ever even get to 3 mana, or even 2 mana in Aquarian Ranger for a functional 3 mana. You're just going to have some games where you won't even get to equip your Viridian Longbow and could lead to some real feel-bads. On the other hand, you go with Scattershot Archer and you play it turn 1, you feel like a boss and your opponent just bolts it off and you go on to lose the game and you feel salty. So, you know, Scattershot Archer can come down on turn 1 and win you the game. Viridian Longbow can come down on turn 2 and win you the game. or either one could be susceptible to being problematic. But these are things you should consider. A lot of people right now seem to be going with Scattershot Archer over the Viridian Longbow. I don't know. The other thing that's important to point out, I've mostly just been talking about the Delver and Fairy and Flying Blue creature matchups with the Viridian Longbow, but it's also worth pointing out that Viridian Longbow can target ground creatures, so you could put a Viridian Longbow on any of your creatures and combined with Aquarian Ranger, and you can just start offing 2/2 creatures. Additionally, you can also just start going to the face with the Viridian Longbow. If you reach a board stall state, you can use Viridian Longbow to also dome your opponent. And let's not forget, Viridian Longbow is an elf deck slayer. So for these reasons, I don't know how I feel about just completely eschewing all copies of Viridian Longbow in favor of Scattershot Archer. Personally, I like a mix. I like having, maybe one Viridian Longbow or two, and 2 or 3 Scattershot Archers or something like that, maybe 2 of each. I don't know. I like to mix it up, have a little variety. So anyway, I think that's basically all you need to know about the sideboarding options. Some people like to have a few fog effects. Those come in handy because you can just tempo win against something like Boggles where you might not otherwise be able to win. And the Elves matchup can be tricky, so that's also another reason why I think having Viridian Longbow access is important. It's worth pointing out that a lot of these red-blue Delver decks, one of the reasons that the Elves deck, or not the Elves deck, the Stompy deck can be strong against it is just because you can go all in on making a really beefy creature, and some of these blue-red Delver deck lists don't have a bounce effect. So if you manage to stick an Elephant Guide on top of a Morbid Hunger of the Howlpack on, say, a Nest Invader, so now you have an 8/8 Nest Invader. There's not much they're going to be able to do about that. I mean, maybe they can chain 3. They don't need, the deck only, the blue-red Delver deck only runs 2 mountains, so they cannot do more than 2 removal spells. So they have to hit, they got to get to 4 snow-covered land and double scred your Nest Invader. And if you happen to have Vines of Vastwood backup, even then you might be able to foil their plans. So a lot of times going all in on one creature is how Stompy's going to take out the blue-red Delver deck list. Now it's important to note, we go 180 degrees when it's mono blue Delver. You really want to spread your stuff out. Mono blue Delver is going to be taking advantage of bounce effects, so you do not want to go all in stacking all your sweet stuff on one creature. Also, Elephant Guide only triggers the 3/3 token when enchant creature dies. So the mono blue Delver list is better against Stompy. When it bounces your creatures that are enchanted with Elephant Guide, you're just going to lose your Elephant Guide. However, Rancor, when it's put into the graveyard from the battlefield, regardless of how that happens, is going to go back to your hand. So if they bounce a creature with Rancor, no sweat. So basically, when you're going up against the mono blue list, all mana efficiency aside, I would want to stick my Rancor first and see how they react to that, and use Elephant Guide more as a finisher, more as something to create pressure later on when I know they've already burned a few bounce spells and maybe hopefully they're out, that kind of thing. Or, hopefully they've, I jam my Rancors early, I'm beating in, they're using some bounce spells to slow me down, and then I jam Elephant Guide, hopefully with Vines of Vastwood backup. Another thing you need to know is Spell Stutter Sprites can really be a beating. So you want to get ahead of Spell Stutter Sprite. This is why having something like Viridian Longbow or Scattershot Archer really is imperative, or Gutshot, or all 3. Because if they're able to start building and accumulating a couple of fairies on the board, now they can basically counterspell anything in your deck that's, basically everything in your deck is 2 mana or less except for Elephant Guide. So Spell Stutter Sprite is basically a hard counter to everything in your deck once they have another fairy on the table. And then they ninja the Spell Stutter Sprite, and then they play it again. And yeah, it's just a bad situation. So whoever's going like that dice roll is super important. Being able to go first and get out there where you're able to create pressure on turn 1, and then hopefully, jam another 2/2 and a Rancor on turn 2, so you've got 6 power on board before they can even start counterspelling your stuff. This is really important to get off to a fast, aggressive start. And yeah, that's basically Stompy. It's a really sweet deck. I've actually taken this, not recently, but I've run Stompy through a lot of leagues at certain times in the past just for fun. I enjoy it. It's a fun deck. Um, it's not glamorous. It's not necessarily the most I don't know, challenging thing to do. It's not always the most interesting, but the deck has a lot more play to it, and there's a lot more nuance than you might expect. Your sequencing can be very important. Just again, taking care of your fundamentals is going to make a huge difference with a deck like this. And it's just a great deck. I think a lot of people have zero complaints when a deck like Stompy is at the top of the metagame. So yeah, that's basically Stompy. I have one other little minor note I want to leave with you guys. I have a little project I'm working on. Taking a shift here. I am now done talking about this Stompy deck, so if that's all you're here for, feel free to tune out. But I know there's been some people that have been complaining about these blue decks. These basically, mostly, I think the complaints are mostly focused on the Tireless Tribe and mono blue and red blue Delver slash fairy decks slash ninja decks, all just really dominating the metagame right now. So what I've been doing is I'm doing some testing right now, which I'm focused on developing a list that has a really high win percentage against Izzet Delver, maybe a reasonable win percentage against mono blue Delver, pretty decent win percentage against blue-based Tron decks, and just straight up folds to Stompy, and has a pretty good win percentage against Inside Out Combo, maybe a 50-50 matchup against all-in creatureless blue-black control, and a really good win percentage against Gurmag Angler control list, folds to Boggles, folds to Elves, maybe 50-50 against Burn. So the idea is to develop a deck that basically beats up on all the decks that people think are too strong right now, while losing to all of the decks that people don't really mind, at least right now. Like, I know there are times when people can get annoyed at Boggles, especially in Modern, but I feel like in Pauper, when Boggles is doing well, people seem pretty cool with that. People seem pretty cool with Stompy doing well, Goblins, really even Elves. There's just been a lot of complaints that, quote-unquote, blue is too good. Frankly, I really think this is just a lack of creativity. I think there's a lot of new people coming into the game right now. So I think, yes, these blue decks are quite good. They do have a lot of play to them. But I also think that they are not quote-unquote solutions to the metagame. Izzet Delver is not a deck that just has an excellent win percentage against everything. It is very beatable. And you can even play a list that, if you're able to figure out how to beat Izzet Delver, then you're probably not too far off against having game against Inside Out Combo. And this is a formula that can be cracked, and I think in such a way that a lot of people will appreciate. So I'm bringing you a little teaser here. I'm working on it. I'm in the lab. I'm tinkering. I'm gonna brew something that doesn't use preordains or ponders or brainstorms, because that would just be cheating, right? And I'm gonna brew something up that just smacks around Izzet Delver and Inside Out Combo. But because of that, it's probably just gonna fold to these hyper aggressive decks, because to beat tempo, you really want to have a kind of a game plan where they can't out tempo you. You just beat them at their tempo plan. But the kind of strategies you're probably enacting to do that usually mean you're going to fold to a really linear aggressive deck. So anyway, I'm in the lab. I've got a few finalists I'm working on. I'm going to do some experimentations in the leagues, and in a couple of weeks, maybe a month at the most, I'll bring you some info on that. Anyway, if anybody has any special requests for any particular types of videos that you'd like me to put out, any topics or you want me to cover, or decks you want me to break down, just let me know. And yeah, that's pretty much it for today. Thanks so much for tuning in and checking this channel out, and you have a great day. Peace.